Good evening and hi from European Identity Conference 2009. I'm Felix Gaehtgens and I have here with me Yves Mahler, Director for Emerging Technologies in the identity field. Yves, you had a fascinating keynote today. You talked about the online relationships, the problems in that space, and you proposed actually even a new standard to solve some of these. That was really exciting. Can you rehash that for our viewers?
Sure. I talked a little bit about the user-centric identity technologies that we've been seeing and some of the problems still inherent in a person's online experience in having to share information with, say, e-commerce sites over and over by typing the information manually as opposed to being able to share it in a kind of pull fashion or publication subscribe fashion. And I was proposing some requirements that need to be met that have to do with users wanting to have their information accessed in a permissioned or authorized fashion, even when they're offline, and in a way that accords with their own contract terms for the data sharing with that party. And so we proposed that a relationship manager component needs to exist. And I showed some suggestive screenshots of a hypothetical application called Cop Monkey that would be your data sharing policeman, and described a draft protocol called Protect Serve that some colleagues of mine and I have been working on to govern those relationships so that we can really see a web ecosystem evolve where this kind of thing happens, where you have centralized authorization that you can kind of get a data sharing dashboard or a digital footprint dashboard of all of your data sharing across the web.
So how does that actually work? I define, let's say, the contractual terms of that you are allowed to use my identity, but you're not allowed to cache them, you're not allowed to store them, you're not allowed to sell them. You're only allowed to use them once, but not afterwards, or any of the above. And I can cancel that at any time. And then how does that actually work? You mentioned a protocol called OAuth that would be used to grant permission for this data to others. How does that actually work?
So there's a couple of questions in there. First, I'll say that OAuth is getting to be very popular technology for, they call it distributed authorization, where you've got two services. Actually, in the case of OAuth on the web as it is today, they know each other already, but in the context of your login session with each of them, you can introduce them to each other to do things on your behalf. So for example, Twitter and a number of third-party applications that work with Twitter can do things on your behalf with your account without your having to expose your Twitter password to those third-party applications. It's very interesting for that. So it's enabling of some of the things I want to do, but it kind of doesn't go far enough. On the other hand, one of the things I want to do is, as I say, allow users to impose contract terms on the acceptors of this data sharing relationship so that they can continue to receive fresh data over time. And this is a vendor relationship management or VRM use case that's quite widely known now, things like change of address. And indeed, the prospect of having some sort of machine-readable, human-readable, and lawyer-readable contract, a la Creative Commons for copyright, it's a bit of a pipe dream right now. I do know of one example in the wild where it's being used for something called OpenID CX, contract exchange, but it's a very limited circumstance and not kind of internet-wide. So I think that it's something we should strive towards. I'm willing to believe that vendors who would be in the position of having to accept such a contract may balk. And it just demonstrates that individual people can continue to be at a disadvantage with online services. And there's a number of ways to tackle that, but I think one of the ways that we might appeal to such services is, you're going to get a fresh feed of information about me. You won't have to, say, deliver things to the wrong address. You won't have to get inaccurate data. And I'm willing to give this to you for a lifetime if you behave. And it's possible we'll get a more healthy relationship with online vendors if we can get them to accept that proposition. So I think there's some business models to be worked out, but I'm hopeful that it can be attractive to everybody involved.
Yeah, do you see a lot of users kind of getting really tired of just entering that information over and over and over again? I mean, I remember that recently ago I just received some invitations for Plaxo and some of the others, and it's like, oh, I'm not signing up for another one of these. I mean, not that it's necessarily bad or that I wouldn't like it, but it's just I have so many accounts already and none of them can be linked with each other. So do you really sense that users are getting tired, or do they not really just care?
I'm given to understand that in the German market, people are much less willing to share information and are willing to walk away from getting service entirely, whereas in the US, we just sort of say, oh, the heck with it, and we sign up and we give the information. I personally never sign up for almost any Facebook apps, for example, because they're very invasive and I don't like the kind of paradigm of how far my information travels. But I know a lot of people just say, oh, I just really enjoy the convenience and I enjoy the fun of it, and they just sign up. So I think they do get tired when it comes time to update anything important. 4 years ago, I happened to move twice in the period of 6 months. And now we're not talking Facebook kinds of things, but real things that are important that have value, whether it's Amazon or things being delivered to your home or services that are really important to you. And I have maybe 100 websites where my address is stored by value on their site, and they think they're owning something important about me, but they're really not. I mean, it's not like that's the gold source of information. I'm the authoritative source of my address. They're not. So they think that through their CRM systems they own something valuable about me, but it does go stale eventually, and there's information that's more volatile than my address that I'd love for them to have, and I'd love for them to have a fresh copy of, which they'll never get. They're not asking. I'd never give it to them if they asked under current conditions. So, I'd love to be able to expose my travel calendar to a whole bunch of, online vendor parties, as long as I knew they were going to treat it with respect.
So it sounds like a real win-win situation. Maybe they won't balk at it, actually, as you suggested.
I'm always hopeful and optimistic, but I realize that it's probably going to take somebody with a really disruptive business model to do this. And I pointed out in my talk that companies like Plaxo and Chimp, and even if you look at Google and the way they're trying to sort of become your service provider on the web, they're already asking to do a lot more. Some of them are asking to aggregate all of your data at one place, which I personally think is impossible. For example, I happen to keep my photos at Flickr. I don't intend to change, but I happen to keep other things somewhere else, say Google Docs or whatever. So you really have to accept a multifarious service provider view of the world for this to work, and that's why I think centralizing authorization while allowing authoritative sources of my data to be distributed is the right answer.
I see a bit of a paradigm shift over here. It's not just when we talk about identity data, it's almost with everything. And we use so many different devices to access, not just the internet, but our data, our mail, our documents, our photos, everything. And exactly as you say, even with our identity, different pieces of our online identity and information about ourselves. This is kind of going in one direction, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons I find OAuth and similar technologies kind of attractive, because they admit that we don't have a green field when it comes to identity, and there's a lot of siloed identities out there. And because it's almost like a capability-based system in that it's just transferring authorizations, and it doesn't care whether you have a really local siloed identity in any one place, it's able to connect up permissions between services. And so I find that really attractive, and so one of the features that we're trying to build into ProtectServe is that it's, call it late bound to identity. It doesn't really care what identity system is used in any one service. It's agnostic as to the choice. But if you happen to use an OpenID, or if you happen to use information cards, or you happen to use SAML, it's okay with that too.
Tell us again, because I already forgot, you mentioned where the name ProtectServe comes from, and tell us where we can find out some more information about it.
Oh, there's a wonderful movie that came out, I think in 1987, called Demolition Man, and in the security community, a lot of people, I think, sort of paid attention to it because it had this wonderful, scary use of like RFID tags, and in the movie, Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock are, these police officers, and of course they have chips under their skin to track them wherever they go, and that sort of thing. And in that universe, it takes place in the future, of course, the far future. The cops don't have "to protect and to serve" written on their vehicles as they do in the U.S. now. They have just "ProtectServe" because they've shortened everything. So they'll say "ProtectServe in place. We have the suspect in view." And we just thought, well, you're protecting and you're serving. And the main designer of ProtectServe and I, Paul Bryan, who's an OpenSSO architect, we're both movie buffs and we both like Demolition Man, and so ProtectServe it was.
All right. Thanks a lot, Eve, and good luck with ProtectServe.